before there's the official introduction of tonight's speakers, I just want to mention the fact that this lecture, unlike some of the others that we have that are funded as named lectures, this lecture is actually possible because of the generosity of the Ruth and Norman Moore family, who gave not one but two professorships to this school. The first one I have the privilege of holding, which is for a full-time member of the faculty, and the second is a visiting position, which is extremely rare to have a named visiting position, at least at this university. And so I wanted to sort of thank the Ruth and Norman Moore family for this double generosity that we have, and to welcome my fellow Ruth and Norman Moore professors, and Monica will introduce them. So.
Thanks, Robert. Hello, everyone. Okay, it is my pleasure to introduce tonight's speakers, Anna and Eugenie Bach, this semester's Ruth and Norman Moore visiting professors of architecture. We're really thrilled that you're here with us in St. Louis teaching. Anna and Eugenie have their practice in Barcelona, where they have been working over the past, I would say, 20 years or so, on a wide range of projects of different types and different scales, from public buildings, public space, to exhibition design and also curation, work that has received many awards, but just to name a few, they have 2 FAT awards in Spain, and the Chernikov International Prize, which is awarded every 2 years to young architects. And their work has been published in many magazines, Domus, Arquitectura Viva, Interni, Mark Magazine, among others, and it has been exhibited at the Lisbon Architecture Triennial and the Lisbon Biennial. They are both educators. They have been teaching design and architecture for many years at various universities in Spain and in Europe. Anna is originally from Helsinki, where she completed her architecture degree from the Helsinki University of Technology and holds a master's degree from the Barcelona School of Architecture, the same school where Eugenie, who is from Barcelona, obtained his architectural degree, and where both of them are currently completing their PhDs in architecture. Alongside their practice and teaching, Anna and Eugenie have consistently engaged in significant architectural activities. They have always been very active and very present, participating and leading initiatives to disseminate architecture not only to the professional community but also to the public, to the general public, through multiple cultural institutions. So most notably, I think some weeks ago, they completed their 2-year appointment as directors and curators of the past edition of the Spanish Architecture and Urbanism Biennial, an appointment that they won through a public competition together with Oscar Ares. And they are currently working on an exhibition for the Alvar Aalto Museum in Finland called Human Traces World Heritage. I don't know if we're going to see that work, maybe not. And among their notable installations is the recent temporary transformation of the Mies van der Rohe Pavilion in Barcelona, where they erased all traces of perfection and materiality by covering all the walls with white adhesive. I don't know if we're going to see this one, maybe yes. And the installation was a subject of a recently published book called Missing Materiality. Yes, so please join me in welcoming Anna and Eugenie.
Okay, thank you all for being here, and I would like to add to the thanks that Robert earlier mentioned to the Ruth and Norman Moore for this generous invitation. We are really honored to be in St. Louis, continuing the international history of visiting professors. And thanks especially for Monica, for Heather, for also Robert as some kind of a il padrino adopting us here. Let me see, this is... So I will first explain a little bit how we will structure our lecture. First, I will talk a bit of our practice as a whole, a little bit of the interests that we have as a studio. Then, on the second part, we like to think of our interest in architecture often through words, through concepts. And we will be explaining or opening one of them, one of those more important ones, introducing the concept of multiplicity to you. And then after this, we will see some of our projects. So maybe then you will see them in different light after all the previous explanation. We like to work in different scales, in different projects. So we are not specialized in any typology or any specific architecture. We enjoy working with the small, working with the fast, like here we would see a party, a set for a presentation of New Balance sneakers, or some other more or less large ephemeral projects, installations that would last only for some days. The previous one lasted only for some hours. But the question is that these quick projects, that they are quick, not always, the thinking process is not always quick, but the construction and the dismantling is very fast. So sometimes it's only for 24 hours, or for 1 week, or for 2 weeks. But we find that in architecture that is so such long-term work often, and so serious, and dealing with so big money and so big resources, whether they are human or material, we really enjoy of quick projects, because they are the very few moments that we can really test things in a less serious or less compromised way. So in that way, also the projects in interiors help us to work on a small scale, which obliges us to think of the interior project from inside, and also to deal with detail, deal with kind of the last layer of architecture, which is the one that actually we live with and we touch and we sleep on, etc. So in that way, the small projects are often frustrating economically and time-wise, and with the implication of a private client and all those kind of negative aspects, but they also teach a lot, and they also teach us a lot of life. We have made housing in different scales lately, having these projects that also have to deal with heritage at the same time as these new layers of life. So that's how we see that architecture in Europe is going to be every time more and more also. We will be working in already built environments, whether it is a building or an urban area or a larger complex. This would be a public building that we are lately working on in Barcelona. It's going to be a youth center and a daycare in an old building that doesn't have like a heritage value, but it is there, so it's incorporated also to the project. Then there are some other programs like office building. This is a particular project that we designed together with Eugénie's father, Jaume Bach, who is also an architect. And like this, we have to kind of deal with the change of scale and change of also the processes. Sometimes the smallest projects are the most difficult ones because you're the only agent, like the only design agent. When you are working in big projects like this, you have a whole team of people who know a lot, often more than oneself. Other challenges would be to work in urban scale in this project in Olot, which is a city northwest from Barcelona. That would be maybe best known as the town that RCR, the Pritzker winning architects are practicing. And actually this urban space, it's touching one of their interventions, so it was a hard part, or other urban spaces. The difference in scale and the difference of assignments, the different teams, they are all something that we find that make our professional life much more interesting, and also our responses to the different projects would be out of the box. In this, the university or the different schools would help us as well, and we hope that at the same time we can help those institutions. We have had the chance to teach in many different schools, and often with very quick workshops, and also having to deal with a one-to-one scale, which we feel that for students is really an important experience to actually see what they do. And then even in our free time, sometimes we build architecture. This is a playhouse for our kids. But this means it's just a sign of enjoying the say it, architecture or thinking on space in all levels, and even being ready to spend your summer vacations on that. As Monica mentioned, we have been the curators of the latest Spanish Biennial. There's just a new team that started a couple of weeks ago. But it was an interesting project, both content-wise, reviewing the best architecture in Spain from the last 2-3 years, and exhibiting it and trying to communicate the values of architecture to the society as whole. And yes, we have one slide of the exhibition that we are working on in the Alvar Aalto Museum in Jyväskylä in Finland, that will be opened in the end of May. So after this quick introduction to the different interests or to the different work of the studio, Eugenie will talk of these concepts or words that we try to invent to somehow describe the interests of our work.
Okay, it's working. Could we dim the light a little bit more? It's just that I want you to see the images and not me, actually. Okay.
The pointer you have to point here.
Sorry?
That you have to point here.
No, I can do it like this.
Ah, okay, but the change.
Okay. Elective affinities. This is these words: multiplicity, imperfection, materiality, the unexpected little twist, and life and time. They are somehow the words that we have on the table always when we're working. Okay. Always in our discussions, there come these words that they come from different backgrounds and from different, of course, elective affinities comes from the book, from the Goethe book, but the unexpected little twist is a term that comes from a movie by Billy Wilder, where suddenly there is the structure of the movie, and then there is a cut in the movie, and there is one of the characters of the movie who says that, my friend, you think that now this is what will happen because the structure is so clear. But now it comes the unexpected little twist that changes everything. And then suddenly the story goes from another direction. No? And these are concepts that we like to get into our architecture. And you will see that we try to grasp knowledge from everywhere, not only from architecture, but from life itself. I mean, at the end, we always say that life and architecture, it's almost the same. We can learn from a movie, we can learn from a book, we can learn from our friends, we can learn from many things, okay? So you will see that many of the examples that we will put, and on purpose also to show the students that you have to have your mind open, not only be all day doing architecture, but also, I don't know, have friends, go to the movies, travel a lot, okay? That's also a very important way of learning. Okay, but today we'll talk of this one, that it's actually one of the main, and the one that somehow gathers all the other terms around, and I hope you will see why. And this is a term, multiplicity, that somehow we understand it in a very certain way. We understand it as the capacity of a work, it can be a work of art, it can be a movie, it can be a work of architecture, to be understood by layers of content, okay? This is an example that we put very often, that it's a photograph by David Hockney, one of the photo collages from the 80s. And the nice thing of this photo collage is that if you take each photograph independently, it has a meaning. No? This one, it's telling about the context. It seems that she's in the studio. That one, that she's in her house. Some, they just explain that she's in a relaxed place. Some, they talk about the light that it's there. I mean, you can take each photograph separately, and it has a meaning. But all together, they have even another, no? They go far beyond, no? Also, this type of photographs, they do a very interesting thing, that when they have been taken through time, they are capable, the whole set is capable of embed time inside the work of art. So somehow here we see an image of Billy Wilder lighting his cigar, but at the same time we see how he's enjoying the cigar, how he's lighting the fire, etc. So we have somehow a larger span of time embedded in a single image, okay? Because at the end, this is just a single image made of different ones, no? Okay, if I am not explaining well enough, I will put more examples. This is something that happens, for example, in Patinir's painting. Patinir is a painter from the 16th, end of 15th, beginning of the 16th century, known in some groups as the inventor of landscape, okay? And his paintings, that they are quite small, actually, you can see them in the Prado Museum, most of them, and they are actually relatively small, but they have a lot of detail. And the interesting thing of these paintings is that usually they have a central story, okay? In this case, landscape with Charon crossing the Styx, okay? But if you look to the left, there are small stories happening all over, and lots of stories happening behind that they relate to the Bible passages, okay? This is what would happen in this case, or in this case with Saint Jerome, or in this case with the rest on the flight to Egypt, that we have the Virgin Mary here in the middle with Jesus, okay? Everything, that's the focal point of attention. But here we have the story of the killing of the innocents, and back there we have the idols of, of Heliopolis, exactly, no? So, one single painting is explaining a story. It's embedding time, it's explaining things that have happened in a quite large span of time, no? Similar, in a very different way, of course, to the photo collage of Hockney. Okay, but this happens or we can find it in many other places, okay? For example, a movie like Pulp Fiction, it's a very dear movie for us because in '94 we were young, okay? And that's when we saw the movie and it had a great impact on us, okay? But this movie has something very special, that if you say, okay, who is the main character of this movie? It's impossible to say, because it's not Samuel L. Jackson, it's not John Travolta, it's not Uma Thurman, etc., because they are all together, because it's a story made of stories. And the nice thing of this movie is that you can, I don't know if you can cut it, no? You can mount it in as many different ways as you want, and it always will work, because it's made of different stills, let's say, that they are just put together. They all have a frame timeline, but it can be analyzed separately and also at the same time, okay? Okay, if this, and then there is an interesting thing that many of the movies of Quentin Tarantino make is that he every now and then travels to the past, okay? He makes these relationships, okay, in this case with Fellini, okay, just by putting small pieces of other movies, which is something that we have to say that actually we enjoy very much doing also in our projects, to have small hints of other projects that are somehow hidden, and whoever who wants to discover, they can do it. It's like a game. Okay, now let me see, because this is an example of exactly the same thing, but related to music, okay? In music, that's something that happens very often, this multiplicity, because of course music is made many times by the conjunction of many different instruments, okay? And that can be more evident. All the instruments can flow in the same direction, okay? That could be some symphonies, etc. Or they can be each instrument having somehow its own laws. That would happen, for example, in jazz, or in free jazz especially, okay? In free jazz there is some kind of inner rhythm that even sometimes it's difficult to grasp, okay? But each instrument follows that in its own way, okay? As the audience is relatively young, we thought that instead of putting some jazz, we would go to the Chemical Brothers, okay? And this is a song, if I find the keyboard here, okay? This is a song that, just for you to, it's a small exercise, okay? But I think that it will show very well what we mean. Imagine that each instrument in this song, that I will now show you, each instrument, imagine that it's a different person. And there is a director
or different person or different part of a building. That
yeah, of
would
course.
be
Hey,
clear.
we are always talking of architecture. I mean, it's obvious. I mean, where are we? So, and there is one instrument who is the structure. And the director said, hey, you are the structure. You clack, pom, 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 pom. You repeat a certain path. And no matter what happens, you are the structure. You repeat that structure through the whole song. Wait, what's happening? Okay. No, just a second. Don't put it yet, please.
Yeah, you can talk with it.
No, because I have to say more things. Just a second. You are breaking the magic, Anna. Okay. We have one guy who is the structure. Then there is another guy that the director says, hey, every 6 seconds you do whoop, and that's it, every 6 seconds. And no matter what happens, you do that. And he's like, okay, I'll do it. The other one, and you, every 4 seconds you do wick, another sound. Okay, like different sounds, and each one has its own laws, each one works separately, but together, you will see, they work. Okay, this is the guy. And look at one thing. The Chemical Brothers, as they know this, they enlarge the introduction of the song very much so that you somehow feel that, okay, this is about structure. Actually, the whole meaning of the song is the structure. Because the lyrics, you will see that it's another guy, okay? He just says, I wanted to believe in something, I wanted to believe in something. I mean, all the time, the same. Right? So we have this one, and then suddenly there comes another one who makes this. And one guy who does. And another one who does. And the other one again. And the other one, all the time. And it goes on and on. And when the lyrics come, they are not explaining any story. They are not explaining that I lost my girlfriend and then I got in love. No. It's just playing. We'll wait for a while. This is another one, no? But you see the ping and the whoop is there. All the time, all the song. I don't know, 6 minutes, all the time doing the same. And now the lyrics.
I need to believe in something. I need you to believe in something. I need to believe.
I mean, where's the message? There's no message. The message is the structure. That's fantastic. I mean, it's like a building. Many buildings are made like that. Many projects are exactly like that. Okay, maybe we can put this. So, no, I'll. Okay, and you might think, okay, and what does this have to do with architecture? Well, a lot. Okay, because for example, this project by Stirling. Now we just show you some very different from different times and from different architects. This project from Stirling and Gowan is actually doing that. It's showing each part separately. Look how every unit of apartments is expressing itself. It's making an effort to get out of the line to say that, hey, I am one piece. But also when you go to the facade, you see the slab, you see the water drainage, the windows, they separate to the slab so that the wall is independent. When the wall has to reach the slab, the shadow here is bigger than the shadow between the bricks to explain its independence. So there is a whole system that explains that each part works separately, but all together they are offering much more. Gehry, in a very spectacular way, or the first Gehry, actually works very much like that. But also we can find that in, I mean, we don't need to do very showing off buildings to work like that. I mean, for example, the St. Hilda by the Smithsons is doing that in a very short width of the facade. Okay, there is one structure that is in concrete, that it's the actual real structure of the building, but then there is a secondary structure that it's not holding the building, that it's just to have this privacy, that it's this wooden one and to relate to the context, etc., which holds another layer, very important, another layer, so it's this summing of layers, and of course, which one is the last layer? The layer of use. The users are the last layer that completes the building, which actually, working in this way, we are generating open systems that allow life to happen in a very, let's say, common sense way, okay? Okay, this is something that in Barcelona happens with two buildings, the absolutely opposite way, in two buildings from the same time, okay? This is a building that I mean, it's not as much known as the one I will show you afterwards, that it's from Gaudí, but by Puig i Cadafalch, where, as you can see when you pay attention, the corners are signified in a different shape. In the places where you need to protect the building, you use stone. When you don't need to protect the building from the chariots and from the street, etc., then you use brick, because it's easier to put. When you need to get to the corner, you use stone again because it's bigger and it holds the edges. When you need to do some decoration, then you use a softer stone that can be carved easily. Same with the, so you see that the beautiful thing of this system is that every material works in its natural way. So you take the materials as they are and you choose them because they are responding to the position and to the function in the building that they are holding, okay? This, look that it's extremely the opposite. This would be a clear case of multiplicity, and this one that you all know is exactly the opposite, okay? Here there are no distinctions between dintels, balconies, structure, etc. It's all like a hybrid. Okay, so the absolute opposite of the multiplicity, it's the hybridization, okay? The hybrid where everything is kind of a, let's say, a blob where facade, structure, openings, materials, roof, base, it's the same. In the multiplicity, it's all absolutely scattered so that every material responds to its place. And just to finish this explanation, it would be like the difference between a milkshake and a fruit salad, okay? In a milkshake, I mean, the ingredients, and again, we are talking of architecture. In a milkshake, we take the ingredients, okay, the materials, and in a fruit salad, they are exactly the same materials. But in a milkshake, what happens? That we put it all together and we make a new thing, okay? That it's the milkshake. Great invention, by the way, I mean, very good, but it only gives you one texture and one flavor, okay? It's a flavor that it's very special because it holds many things. It's a texture that it's new because it's not in nature. We don't have trees of milkshakes. It's new, but it's only one. While in the fruit salad, the architect is the one who says which ingredients you put and how you put them, if you cut them small or big, if you put strawberry, apple, and kiwi or something else. You decide that, but the one who decides how you eat it is the user. You take the spoon and you can choose if now I take some banana and some apple and I put it to my mouth, or if I want to take more orange and kiwi because I want something more, I don't know, acid, yeah. So, and then what happens? When you put it to your mouth and you smash it, you get everything at the same time, but at the same time you get everything separately. You can feel how the apple crashes, you can feel how the orange explodes, and you can feel how the banana is soft. You can have all separately and all at once. Much better, no? Absolutely much better. So, that's why in our private life, we never have milkshakes, we always have fruit salads, but also that's why in our professional life, we try that our buildings, the experience that we would like that our buildings are able to transmit, we would like that they are like fruit salads. Okay.
Well, now then to show how this works in, in architecture or in our architecture, we'll show something like 4 projects.
Something like that.
I'll start with a very early project of the studio, a small single-family house, actually a weekend house. So it's kind of even smaller than what a one-family building would be. In the north of Catalonia, 1.5 hours from Barcelona to the north, in a rural area, in a very, very small village where there are no services at all, just typically a church and some houses and some sheep. We are, as it's one of the very early work, we are working with very few, like very limited resources, and we just know that the most economical way to deal with this program is to do a box, like a shoe box. But then how to get something out of this shoe box, how to make it contextual, how to create interesting spaces that you would enjoy, especially in the hot season. So we make a shoebox with a porch. Also thinking that this porch will be maybe 1/10 of the cost of the square price per square meter inside the house. It's made in a very, very traditional way, just bearing walls, only with the exception of the corner that it has a little bit more sophisticated solution. But what I want to comment today here is the stripes. That is kind of the striking feature, maybe. The stripes are not here to be striking. They are actually here to make the building lighter and more related to the greenery around it. But it also has a very, very pragmatic reason to be there. And that's why we place these Beaux-Arts entrance with the Czech floor next to it, because there is a sense in using contrast in your favor. These floors of black and white marble are absolutely smart, because what's the problem when you work with relatively small pieces of, for example, white marble or black marble? What happens? We have a lot of joints, and all these joints tend to be either dirty and darker than the white marble, or dirty and lighter than the black marble. When we place this in this Czech pattern, what we get is such a huge contrast between the white pieces and black pieces that nobody would ask for the joint anymore. It disappears because it's integrated into the drawing. So we are in a very kind of low-cost way, we are repeating that and painting our building in white and green stripes, because we are using a building technology that's very unperfect. And not only unperfect, it's really perfect in the first day, but what happens is that with the humidity and the temperature changes of the climate, it gets these small cracks all over. And when we have a building that is, let's say, white, with those little cracks that don't present any kind of structural problem, they are just in the surface. But what happens is that all the dust, all the rainwater, all that start to mark these little imperfections around the facade. And what we have when we place kind of a layer of graphics on the top of that is that the graphics would always win. We would always see the stripes, and we wouldn't see that actually there are little imperfections all over the wall. So it's accepting the way how the material works and giving a graphic solution to solve that practical problem. Otherwise, the house, the shoebox in itself has a inwards tilted roof to collect the rainwater. It has a double layer roofing so that we get kind of a natural heat insulation, natural ventilation inside the roof form, also helped by the slope in the ceiling. So we have some holes here in the lower part of the roof that suck the cool air in, and then as the ceiling or the roof gets heated, it makes a constant circulation of cooler air. So basically, in this case of the house, it is to think on the very few resources that we have, to use them in an intelligent way, and to apply this graphic pattern so that it somehow relates us to the greenery around the Mediterranean forest that we have around the house, and also has this play with the shadow of the cane porch.
Okay, this is a very different project because this is in Barcelona, in a neighborhood called Horta. And Horta is a very special neighborhood because it has a structure, well, it used to be a village, like many neighborhoods in Barcelona that originally were villages until Barcelona grew and ate them, okay? But Horta has a special character, and when we got the commission to do a house in a plot that was empty here, we thought that, okay, how do you do a house in this neighborhood and you are from the neighborhood, and you are not like an alien that came from somewhere else, no? So the first thing that we do is to, okay, let's see what's the language of Horta. Let's see how are all the houses in Horta, what are the common features, okay? And as you can see here, they are basically 1 or 2 floors, two or three. It's just that in Spanish we say different. Okay, 2 or 3 floors, vertical windows or balconies, shades, use of color, okay, though it has been lost because many of the houses are old, but there was a lot of color in Horta. So we take all those ingredients and we draw the elevation of the street, and this is our plot, okay? And we detect that actually everybody from different times, everybody is following the rules of being a good neighbor, okay, of following those Horta rules, except one that we have just next to us, that it's this one. You will see. The rules are a wall facing the street, aligned to the street, a plinth down, okay, sometimes small, sometimes bigger, vertical windows, balconies, and blinds, okay? These are the ingredients that we say, okay, if that's the language of Horta, let's speak that language, okay? And that's what we do. But we have this neighbor that, let's see if this works. Yeah, we have this neighbor on our left who is doing, is doing absolutely everything to ruin that piece of the street, okay? Because the windows are square, they are not vertical, there are no balconies, there is no plinth, it's not aligned to the street. It's not following anything of the rules of the street. And of course, we have to build a project here, and we could just, let it be and say, okay, it's not our business. Let's forget about it and let's just do our project. But we somehow wanted to redeem this neighbor who was behaving so badly, okay? It was like, come on, what can we do from our side without touching it? How can we do it to somehow embrace it and say, hey, you're one of us again, don't worry, okay? And to do that, well, it's obvious, no? We just do this balcony. This balcony that seems like a lost balcony, actually it's the most generous balcony of all, because it is there to give some privacy in the terrace. Yes, you will see it later, okay. But basically it is because like this, our building is use some kind of a joint that the wall aligns with this one here, and the balcony somehow is taking that one there. So it's a way to say that, okay, come back, we pardon you, no? We pardon you, okay? And you can be, again, part of the street, okay? And then it's just a question of those ingredients, no? Those words that we use for talking this language, the language of Horta, just to work with them, okay? With some details, like the joints of the plinth, they follow, no? The lines that in the ground floor, just for protection, is there. Very light balconies, the blinds. Sorry, but sometimes this doesn't pass, and that's why, okay. And then the program is very simple because it's just 3 apartments, very small, extremely small apartments, actually as small as the regulations allow, because the plot was actually smaller than what it should be. Okay, so we had to look for many ways to be able to fit those apartments in a good way. And you can see that the ground floor has a small patio here, and these 2, they will use, you will see it later, the terraces up there. Okay, this is the main entrance, the studio apartment on the ground floor with the patio, and then what we did is to unify all the kitchen, toilet, and stair in the middle, and to have 2 equal spaces, you see these trapezoids here, that they are the same, so that it allows that you can choose if you want this to be the living room and this is the bedroom, or vice versa, or if you want to share the apartment to students who rent the apartment, they can have each one the same space. And then on the terrace, what we do is exactly the same. There is a common area with the installations, and then 1 terrace for one of the floors, 1 terrace for the other apartment, and the patio down for the 3rd one. And then, well, the rest, sorry, maybe I have to point here. Yeah, and the rest, it's a question of, minimizing many things. I mean, if we don't, minimizing where we clad so that we have the installations, but not where we don't need to, having the stair ventilated, the space up here, that you can have some privacy and spy your neighbors from up there. Okay, view from up, then this unifying color. The color actually comes from a building that is just in front of ours, well, a little bit more down the street. And then just controlling some small details, very simple. I mean, sometimes we say that our details are no details, no? I mean, that it's so simple that actually the detail is that there is no, that it doesn't exist, that the detail doesn't exist. Okay.
Okay. Here we are in close to the first project in a village center, in a very special place, because it's an old chocolate factory placed in the middle of a plot, and here the question is that we have to transform this old chocolate factory into a private house, pretty large private house, but it's also a private house for a family of 24 members, because there is the typical new family with a lot of divorces, a lot of kids. The kids already are half adult. They have their partners, whatever. So when everybody's at home, or when everybody comes to visit this house, they would be 24. So one of the things was to have a table for 24. Anyway, I won't go so much to the program. I just want to mention of this project that when you're working with existing buildings, and of course in the Spanish European context, some of them have a lot of history and have a certain age. The use would be obsolete. So what we paid attention to in this building is that it has these 3 very different kinds of slabs. So originally these 3 different open spaces have a totally different character because of the roof or the ceiling that it is hosting it. So that was something that we wanted to keep in in the project. Anyway, then we had a use that we had to make small pieces, especially in the middle floor. So what we do is that we really try to respect the rhythm of the building. So even though we break the middle floor into these smaller spaces, they would be the bedrooms, like the more conventional bedrooms, the more visitor-like bedrooms. We would always respect the structure. So somehow even the program, the number of rooms would come dictated by the structure. Another decision that we make is that the building itself has a certain rough beauty, and we try to keep that and be very economical in our gestures. So actually we use green paint and some very light structures, green shades. In the exterior, everything that has been somehow modified is green, but as you see, there are very few things in the whole project. And in the interior, we have to give this new equipment like kitchens and bathrooms and so. But they're very like small interventions in the old, rough and in itself beautiful space. We do a second staircase. There already was one, as you can see. It's quite, how would I say, not very adapted to any kind of hip problems or moving objects up and down. But still, we thought that it was part of the industrial history of the building, and also it gives us flexibility of use that I will explain you now. The thing is that the building, the house is of a couple. They would be 50, 55, almost 60 years old, and they would have all these kids and friends and people visiting them, and they would like to be able to divide the house in various ways. So we can understand the whole building as one big family home with plenty of bedrooms in the middle floor, but also another bedroom upstairs with a kitchen also and a living room. Here also some living area, the 24-seated table here and with a kitchen. But, and having one staircase here, another one there, and an entrance here. Anyway, if we think that there is a couple visiting, the visitors could enter from this entrance staircase, occupy this small living room and the whole big area here. Or they could have another room and they could end up adding more and more. Anyway, this staircase would allow these bedrooms to be used for the downstairs flat. So these pivoting doors that we place in these strategical places here allow us to keep on adding rooms, or again use it as one whole. Here we can see some of the top floor areas that is more like less maybe noble area, and we see kind of the most primitive slab structure as well.
Okay. This is a very different project because it's a public space in the city town of Olot. And here, basically, we want to explain a couple of things. One, this is the project. I mean, it's a very large area in the center. This is the main church, bullfighting arena. Okay, I mean, what else do you want? We are in Spain. And here there was a project. Actually, this is a square, a boulevard square, by RCR from a project that had to be all over the city, okay? But they only realized this part, and actually the project was abandoned there. So we were doing a project next to an area that was supposed to be much bigger. Also, there was an existing project here of this street and an existing project here of this one. And the thing was how to link 3 different projects and add ours, okay? And what we did was to define very well with this geometry what is the boulevard of the city, okay? This one, define the edge also of this one, and then these 2 pieces with different pavement, etc., they are linked by this more uncontrolled form of all the edges and spaces around, okay? And in the middle of the 2 boulevards, we created a new square that didn't exist before, okay? So basically, this is this geometry, and then all this area here works with this double geometry of the direction of the boulevard and the direction of the other boulevard by RCR that it's here. And that's why there are these twists, okay, to match both geometries. This is the elevation of our project, actually. Even if it's an exterior place, it has an elevation, okay? And this is how we mark, because if you check this plan, this boulevard, it's flanked on this side by all this housing, and on the south by this housing here, but suddenly it's open. And what we do is that to control that geometry is that we put this structure here that it's actually a light that divides both spaces, so you have the idea that the boulevard is all continuous, okay, even if in that part there are no houses, and you control also the space of the square, okay? So this is the end of the boulevard that ends in this structure here that I will now explain. So the pavement of the main boulevard is with granite, with rectangular pieces and set in a very geometrical way. And of course, when you are working in an area that it's more uneven, what we did is to work with concrete, okay? And then playing with those 2 geometries. And then in these areas where there is no direction, how do you do the holes for the trees? There, it's clear they are like rectangulars in this direction, taking two trees. But in here, as there is no position, the best geometry is the round shape. Okay, and here you see the 2 directions, okay, that we make more, let's say, more visible by placing these stones, that they are basalt stones, because Ulot is a volcanic area, and it has a lot of basalt, so it's a way the small grain of the concrete is also basalt, so that it has this stone, and then we place these stones that they are showing this complexity of the two geometries. And then at the end of the boulevard, there is this structure that actually they asked us for a fountain. They wanted a fountain at the very end of the boulevard, so in the axis of your view. But they specified that the fountain had to be off most of the time, like maybe 90% of the time, the fountain had to be off. And then you say, okay, how do you design a fountain that has to look good when it's off? Because the problem of fountains is that when you see a fountain that doesn't have water, it's sad. You say that, oh, what? No, there is a problem in this city. They have some problem with the fountain. It's not working, okay? So here we said, okay, how can we do that? And at the same time, how can we do that? It's the end of the boulevard, but at the same time that you have some transparency, because actually the whole space continues. And well, our conclusion was to make a fountain that when it's open, it makes like a cloud, okay? A cloud of water. In summer, it's very useful, especially for kids or running here. But when it's off, it's like a landmark that shows you through, but at the same time is saying that here there is the end of the boulevard. And again, with this round shape, because all the edges of this area are absolutely uneven. Okay, of course, the fountain has a big complexity. I mean, it's not just as easy as you see it. But that's it. And then taking care of the details, and again, what we said, no? In some places, I mean, of course, you take care of the type of stone, how you place it, how you drain the water, etc. And in some places, the detail is the absence of detail, no? It's just, well, I mean, if we don't want the cars to go into here and we want to show them the way, let's just take these big blocks of basalt that they are so typical from the area, and let's just plant them here, no? And that's enough.
Okay. Quickly, this is our smallest project, and I wanted to show this to the students so that they don't get depressed when their first commission is something really, really small. We call it the 1 square meter project. It's maybe a little bit more in square feet. I don't know how to translate it, but as you can all check it.
10 square feet, I think, something like that. Could
Yeah,
be.
okay. Well, we made such a small building that it made us think what's the relation between where does a dress or a costume end and where does architecture start. And we remembered this part of a very typical comic. I don't know if Asterix is common here in the States, but in Europe for sure it is. And we remembered this skinny guy who has such a well-structured jacket that it doesn't even need the guy to stand alone. And we kind of gathered a lot of images of different architectures or costumes that were in this limit of being independent or like being architecture or being costumes. Of course, this is more like a joke of architects being buildings. But there are plenty of examples in the history of costumes that actually are complex structures. And like in this space, there's even the confusion that the kids are playing inside these dresses, so they have really turned into two spaces. But in our case, in this very small guard's hut in the entrance of a big banking company, the thing was that we had such a clear assignment to protect a person, protect one person who would normally be standing somewhere out, but when it rained or it was too sunny, he could get shelter inside. So it's somehow what we think that we are making there's this underwear that is like the basic structure of this little building. Then there's a coat and there's a hat. And basically it is to give shadow and cover your head and avoid the heat of the sun and keep the rain and the cold and the excess of heat away. And I won't explain the project much because the program is quite quickly explained and the form is also quickly explained. But the idea is then that when you treat with such a simple assignment, everything is about detail. Like how do you hold this hat in a way that you don't show how it's attached or how to make it a little bit like airy and also the air literally run through, how to use the material in a very precise way so that it almost is like a textile, like some kind of a plissé detail. And now this will be our last project, so we will all come to a happy end at some point.
Okay, this is the installation that Monica talked about earlier. It's an installation that we did in the Barcelona pavilion, that you all know. And actually what we did was basically to dematerialize, to change or erase the materiality of the pavilion, which is one of the main features of the Barcelona pavilion. To do so, we studied all the surfaces, we chose the right material for doing so, which was a glued vinyl sheet that wouldn't leave any trace, of course, that after our installation you don't take it and it's all sticky. And that has almost no depth, so that it doesn't change the shape of the pavilion, and to place it in such a way that all the joints are respected. So, and you will see why that was so important. And during 5 days, there were these guys that they are professionals of doing so in big supermarkets and big railway stations. Usually not with white, but with ads. But this is the same technique. They were for 5-6 days placing very carefully with our very clear instructions how they had to cover the whole pavilion. Okay? And after those days, what we got was something as perverse as this, because it is perverse. When you know the pavilion, when you love the pavilion, suddenly seeing the pavilion like this, in one sense, it's sad, but on the other hand, you know that it's just for some days. But the interesting thing here is that it triggers a lot of reflections, okay? And now we will share some of the reflections of why we did this. Of course, you can say, well, you had lots of fun. Yeah, we did it for fun, but also because there is a deep understanding of the pavilion and of many things that I will now try to explain. First of all, it was a way to somehow show the importance of materiality in the definition of space. When we see a plan and we just draw lines, we think that those lines, they are already telling everything. But actually, if that line is a green marble, if is a red onyx, or it's a white surface, the feeling of the space is absolutely different. So that's something that, of course, Mies knew very well, and when he and Lili Reich did the pavilion, they did all these luxurious surfaces, all these marbles, onyx, that they were absolutely shiny, much more than the reconstructed pavilion in which we acted, and which actually, now I will show you something that probably you don't know, that in one of the few pictures, this one,
well,
that
here it's good to kind of remind that there are very few pictures of the original pavilion, and most of them are pictures that Mies van der Rohe and Lili Reich orchestrated very carefully. So they were really carefully, like the points of view were really carefully chosen to show the pavilion as an autonomous, independent piece of architecture where there was actually surroundings of a World Fair, which you can imagine is always full of noise.
Okay, so in this particular picture, when you do zoom to this particular area here, you will see how all these reflections made a bad trick to Mies, because when you do a little bit of zoom, you start to see that there are some letters. And you say, hey, what's this? You see the reflection of Kolbe's sculpture, okay, through here, and you say, hey, what's that? And you make it even bigger, and then you can read that here it says, Maggi degustaciones gratuitas, which means Maggi, it's a brand of soup, and degustaciones gratuitas means taste it for free, okay? It would be as if it was Campbell's, taste it for free. And you're like, wow, what's this? What has happened here? And actually what happened is that through this reflection, we are seeing a pavilion that was just in front of the Mies pavilion, but that Mies, controlling all these angles of the cameras, made us think that never existed, that it's actually, you can see there, that it's this one. So in front of the Mies pavilion, there was this Beaux-Artian selling soup pavilion. And actually, this wall here from the pavilion, well, you have to understand that this was an installation that lasted for 2 weeks, but actually we were 2 years working on it. I mean, we went quite deep into many things, and we discovered many things. For example, this wall that turns here, many historians explain the Mies pavilion as 4 corners and 8 columns, and then displaced walls. Okay, the 4 corners, they are really in the 4 edges, but actually the previous plans, this wasn't a corner. This wall didn't turn here. And some people think that actually at the last moment when Mies saw what was happening in front of his pavilion, he thought, hey, we have to do something. Come on, turn the wall, and like this we won't see it so much. Okay? Which is this wall here. Okay? This wall wasn't, in many plans, wasn't there. But you can see, no, the only 4 corners in the pavilion, and then the 8 columns that they are all placed regularly, like in the Chemical Brothers song. Okay, so this is how it looked like, and there are many stories because, let's see, the original pavilion from 29 was a representation of the German soul, okay? That's how it was sold. And actually, if you see the plan resembles very much a house, the plan of the Mies pavilion, and actually, if you study what Mies and Reich had done earlier, it was basically single-family houses, one exhibition of textiles, and one block in Berlin, and the Siedlung in Stuttgart. So basically houses, and this was like the house of the German nation, okay? So it was a building that was representing a notion, okay? The original building, as you know, it was made in 29, but after some months it was demolished, okay? And then the reconstruction of the pavilion was made in 86. So when they reconstruct the pavilion, they are doing a new pavilion that represents a pavilion from 1929 that represents the German soul. So we thought that by turning the pavilion into a somehow one-to-one scale model, what we were doing is changing the building from 86 into a model that represents the building from 86, that represents the building from 29, that represents the German soul. So it was like kind of adding one more layer of representation, okay, which can go on and on. And at the same time, actually, we don't know of any other architect who has done a model of a project that actually was never built, and here there is the paradox, like Mies did, no, for the Kroller-Müller house, that actually this was a competition that he didn't win, and he says that he did a model with white sheets, with wooden structure and white sheets, but actually Philip Johnson, who, when Mies was dead already, in an interview in TV, Johnson claimed that one day that they were drunk, Mies told him that actually this was a collage and that he never did the model. Okay? But in this case, you can neither trust neither Mies nor Johnson. I mean, because they are, I mean, both were, I mean, they wanted to rewrite their own history. Okay? But nevertheless, it doesn't matter if it was built or not, but there was this somehow of dialogue between the installation, no, in white sheets and the model that Mies did once. No?
Well, the one-to-one model.
One-to-one. Okay, and then there is another thing. You could claim that this is a one-to-one scale model, or you can read it in another way that actually maybe it's even, well, more interesting. That is to think that actually what we did is to draw a Mies collage. When Mies draws his collage or his perspectives, he does it on a white sheet, and he doesn't draw the materials, but he draws the joints. That's fantastic. Only by drawing the lines, the joints of the stones, okay, and then placing some collaged image, he was able to explain the project and explain the depth, no? And that's something that happens also in the beautiful photographs that Adrià Goula took, where you only have the white sheet, you have the joints, and you have the collage of the context around, okay? And then there is one thing here interesting, that it's details like this one that many architects...
Yeah, they seem like mistakes, though they are obviously not such thing. But as you see it all in white, things that are absolutely natural in the material world, when you see it all pristine white, seem like mistakes. And we got comments that why haven't you respected Mies's joints? And this is this idea that there are these masters who would never make mistakes. And Mies was more intelligent than this, because if everything matched, the building would be static. As there are these kind of sliding, non-positioned walls, they shouldn't match, but they have a materiality, like being green or being red or being very textured, that it's a little bit like the green stripes in our little building, in a very modest way. There is a pattern that is on the top of the joints. So in those colored walls, it's not important where the joints are. But then in the more clear-colored travertine, the seams match.
Yeah. Here they all match, of course, because this is travertine, okay, in its original position. And the columns, the 8 columns that they are set in a regular way, they are all absolutely in the crossing of the lines. But the other walls, they don't have to be. Actually, it's good that they are not. They have to be like that, because otherwise they wouldn't be expressing that these walls, they are not holding the building. Though, actually, they were, but that's another story. Okay, so this is, I mean, you can imagine the experience walking around the pavilion dematerialized, okay? And then another reflection, that actually the one that we somehow enjoyed the most, is a reflection on how architecture is told, okay? And how on a reflection on historiography, no? On the way we explain the history of architecture. Because the Mies van der Rohe Pavilion was somehow enthroned as an icon of the modern movement in this exhibition in MoMA in '32, curated by Henry Russell Hitchcock and Philip Johnson. And as all or most of the curators, what you want to do is an exhibition that somehow sends a clear message, that everything is pristine. And when you look at the architects that were invited in this competition, in this exhibition, there were very different architects. I mean, Ode, Wright, Bowman Brothers, Howe and Lescas. I mean, it's somehow a very heterogeneous mix. But when you explain it as, and now I simplify, but the catalog basically makes a lot of emphasis in the fluidity of space, the flatness of the roofs, and the wideness of the architecture. And when you think of Ode, you can think of whatever except wideness. I mean, you think of crazy colors, okay? Or Wright, I don't know, Robert, no, okay. So, but when you show those projects in black and white pictures, then the thing changes. Okay? And actually,
you have to remember that the Mies van der Rohe Pavilion, as it was dismantled, so there were only these black and white pictures. Nobody, till '86, nobody had seen the greens, reds, and all the colors of the Mies van der Rohe Pavilion. So it was like a mystery, and for very, very many architects, it was a shock when they saw it built in all its splendor.
So when you explain the history of architecture in black and white pictures, of course, you can bring your message however you want. Okay? And what we did was, okay, if that's their message, let's bring it in a very radical way to the pavilion to show that actually modern architecture is much more complex, much more rich, much more exuberant than what is the first historiography, I mean, of course not all, but the first historiography has made us believe. Views that you never have. I mean, this photograph, you would never take it of the pavilion in its natural state, because you would be all the time looking at the onyx, not looking outside. And then an idea of this praise for imperfection. When a building is so perfect, okay, in the way that we imagine that all white, pristine, all in its place, well, it doesn't accept use, and that's a problem. And then what happens is this. And it was very nice to see how every day the joints were worse and worse, and how there were people who were somehow lifting up the vinyl to see if the pavilion was still there. And for us, that was an act of love, because it's like, is my pavilion still there? Oh, yeah, okay. And bring it back. It was really beautiful to see that, okay? And actually, an imperfection that Mies already had in his original pavilion, because this is one of the photos that, of course, he didn't control, because you see all the roof made in a traditional way when it should. They had to finish the pavilion very quickly, okay? And they were running out of time. And at the end, they just used many traditional systems of construction from the workers in Barcelona that they were not the ideas that they had to use, okay? But for example, here the travertine turns, okay, in that wall that we talked earlier, but this area, as nobody saw it, they didn't put the travertine all the way. They stopped here. So it was imperfect, and it's beautifully imperfect that if it's a building, and now I won't explain all the story, but if it's a building that it's thought to be seen only from one side, like a stage, why do you need to finish it from the other side? No? So here it wasn't finished. And our installation, this is something that nobody noticed, but we knew and we enjoyed alone at home, that we covered with vinyl till this joint, because the reconstructed pavilion has travertine all the way, which actually, I mean, should it? Maybe it shouldn't have, because are we copying the original? Are we doing a concept of the original pavilion? That's a whole discussion.
But it also has a basement and other things because it has converted in a permanent building, not a temporary pavilion.
And then we took all the vinyls one by one off in a more performance way, and we collected them all, we piled them all, we cut the edges, and the beautiful thing, and with this we'll finish, the beautiful thing is that when we took the vinyl off the surfaces, the glue took all the dirt of the stone surfaces. It was like if we had done a peeling, you know, when you do a peeling. The pavilion had never been so clean. And it was beautiful because we could see all the texture of the stone, so it was exactly as if we had scanned all the surfaces of the pavilion. And we thought, hey, we have here all the scanned pavilion, let's put it all together and let's make it into a one single sticky, ugly vinyl volume that actually in this piece, that it's like this contains all the surfaces of the Mies van der Rohe pavilion. Okay, so it's also another, this is now a piece in the collection of the Mies van der Rohe Foundation. And just as a summary of everything, our students, they already know about this, but it's a scheme by the Charles and Ray Eames that we really love because they are able to say in one slide what we have been here saying in 1 hour, which is that they say that if this is the area of concern of the design office, okay, this is the area, or this one, I don't know, the area of genuine interest of the client. And very important, and always have to be there. And this is the interest of the society. They say then it is in this interlocking, but it has to be the interlocking of the three, client, designer, and society always. You can't skip one of them. It is in this area of interlocking that the designer, in this case the architect, can work with conviction and enthusiasm. And that's exactly what we try to do, to work always with conviction and enthusiasm. Thank you.
It's really late, but if somebody has a quick question or slow.
I really appreciate the lecture. It was great. Never thought I'd be able to say you turned meats into a milkshake, so I want to be able to say that. No, but the thought that you put into every project is really impressive. And I'm really curious about how you work together, because there's a chemistry that you can display during the lecture. And I believe your first slide was the drawing of the table from
yes.
above,
Yes.
which it kind of looked like it was both of you. So I'm kind of curious, how do you approach the project? How do you start?
We have worked together since we were 20-something, so we have like a long tradition. We kind of grew up working together or thinking together. So I think that if we now divorced and got a new associate, we wouldn't be able to do that. I mean, it's something that we have kind of very smoothly learned to do that. But basically what's our process is that Eugenie normally gets an idea very quickly, and then I do the critiques. And then it's this process where then he comes with a new corrected idea, and then this is of course an exaggeration, but there is a continuous dialogue in our working process, and it's really good to be two, and of course we have a team and we have more people in the studio, so it's good to be many often because somehow the ideas get molded into kind of more solid when there are several people thinking on the project. So I think that we are really lucky to be able to work together, but it's not always like smooth and peaceful, but it's always very rich and nourishing for the projects.
Yeah, I guess I'm more impulsive. Yeah, and I get the big strategy. I see the strategy of the project. And Anna then makes me, brings me down to earth, you know? And then in that journey from me up here and Anna here, we get usually to one place that, well, we think that it works. Yeah, it will be a way to explain.
You can also think of it the other way around. I'm like up here and Eugene is down.
I was thinking of in the clouds, but anyway.
I actually have to say, it was a really beautiful lecture. You looked so carefully at everything that you worked with. It's really important. It's not something that it's easy. It's not so easy to teach in school because we're removed from a lot of the work we do. We're removed from the process of building it. But I think this tactic of there's nothing that's so small that we can't pay attention to it, and something might get pulled out of it. I mean, it's through all the projects. The urban design project is amazing how in the world you could put that place back together again with all those kind of strong pieces that are coming. But even in the Nice project, which I can only imagine the people who came to see the pavilion for the one and only time in their life.
Well, yeah, we had some, yeah.
We got some hate mail.
But the point is made so beautifully. It completely changes it. And yet, the way it's always been presented, it hasn't been able to convince us about the materiality. The reconstructed pavilion is, I would argue, it's completely difficult. It's a new interpretation. And we have to just take the one the history books away and come back and say, now we have a new one. But again, the way you attack it is about thinking about everything. Even the stripping off story is fantastic. Of sort of having all the dirt, all the joints. Anyway, I just think that is a really hard habit to make. And to convince your client, it's worth paying attention to these small things and convincing yourself. It's that. And we want the big gesture. We love the big gesture. But, I don't think that's what things are made out of. In the end, that's not what life is made out of.
Okay, thank you.
I just want to thank you, Anna and Julie, for the great lecture. And actually, I was very lucky to have Julie for my jazz review for the past year Barcelona project. So
Okay, I was thinking, where, oh yeah.
that was indeed a very impressive, episode, review. But even great that you saw your full presentation, it was great. And also thank you for you give me a whole new perspective for these pavilions, because I have been here a few times. Like the first time, I just came here as like a tourist, as everybody coming into like from the entry that use that and really has to view. The second time was when we were doing the Barcelona program, Milano presented us from the back. She showed us as like was not a pavilion, but showing us as like a housing project. Yeah, but this time you show like totally new perspective. I just really appreciate that.
Okay. Thank you. Nick?
Actually, I have one question about that. You always show that a very beautiful sketch with your finished project. I wonder if that sketch was something you have already done before you project forward. Before the design work, you did it like kind of advanced or
Okay. Yeah. And first of all, you can I? Yeah. Let's see. Some drawings are made afterwards, and some are made before. Some are more like to think the project. Some are just to somehow depict them. Okay. But there is one thing very important in the way we draw, this black and white hand drawn, this is Anna. I mean, she's the one who does these beautiful drawings. And it shows a little bit how we are. Let's see, we are very positive people in general. And we believe that people in general are positive. And if you show an absolutely finished rendering of your future building, you are imposing a certain way of reading that drawing. You are saying, this has to be this wood, does this reflection, the type of light will be this, and when we design, we don't know so well what we will do. I mean, we have lots of doubts, and it's a long process. And the first day when the client says, we need an image of the finished project, we say, we can't give you that. I mean, we have to think. I mean, that's why you pay us for thinking. We need time. And by drawing like this, we leave many things open. You will see a drawing, and you will imagine that the floor is wood because you are more for wood, and another person will imagine that the floor is concrete because he or she would like it like that. So what we are doing is, again, this open system, like the fruit salad, that our drawings, they can be eaten in many different ways. Actually, in so many ways as people are reading that drawing. And always it will be the best way for themselves, not the one that we have imposed. You will read it in a way and another one in another one. Then, of course, once the building is finished, we have to decide. And maybe you will go to a building that you have seen one of the drawings and you say, oh, what a disappointment. I thought that the floor would be wood. But usually, even if you have that disappointment, usually people, they somehow enjoy the result. But it's a question of this idea of the open system, open project, but also the way we explain them.
Could you talk a little bit about the role of humor in your work?
Yeah, architecture is very serious. So and I say it very seriously. We are using a lot of resources. We are playing with other people's money. I mean, these things will be there for a long time. So architecture and humor generally don't do a very good couple. Like, it's not like something that... humor is a little bit like something that you have to be very careful with it. So, but it's something very appealing also. And it's something that even though architecture is very serious, we shouldn't take it that seriously. So I think that's the thing that we try to kind of play with or study or so. And with these short-term projects, there you can be funnier. You can kind of work more with humor. Or small-scale projects or private projects, you can work more with humor. And like that, you can test it for other projects that then are more serious, more long-living or so. Humor, you can't make,
joke.
You can't joke with architecture, but you can have a sense of humor. And I think that there is somehow the line, because jokes make you laugh at the first time you hear them, and then the fifth time it's already terrible. So in that way, it has to be kind of slight humor that maybe lifts a little bit of your lip, but not much more than that.
Yeah, and it has to be, we usually, when we work with that, we don't like maybe the word humor. It's not exactly, but it will be some kind of intellectual humor. I mean, it's a humor that you understand when you somehow make an intellectual effort. It's not just a plain joke.
Yeah, but maybe it's playfulness.
I said humor, but then I added wit. I think maybe wit would be a better term.
Sorry, which one?
Wit.
Okay, I have to learn that one.
Yeah. But it has something to do with the playfulness, and it relates directly to the multiplicity also. So the idea of having like several ways of reading, of experiencing, or feeling about the buildings. So I think that this wit, humor, or playfulness can't be like something that is too overwhelming or too dominating in that layer system.
Yeah, that's for sure. Yeah. Yeah. Luckily, we enjoy very much the professional world, the academic world, the cultural world. I mean, we're involved in so many things because we love it. If it wasn't like that, we would say, hey, we quit. I mean, it was good while it lasted, but that's it. But we enjoy it very much. We really have fun. Yeah.
Speaking of scale, Michelle, and affinity for interiors, do you ever find yourself wanting to design the scale of objects or furniture for spaces, or just as prototypes outside of work?
Well, we have done that, but we didn't show. We have designed many tables and pieces of furniture in these interior design projects, many times we end up, when there is already a good enough design, we don't want to bring another design to this wall just to have our brand or whatever. But when you don't find what you are looking for, then we design it ourselves. And actually, we haven't collected them, and we should, but we have designed many, many objects, and lamps, and tables, and I don't know, cupboards, and yeah. But yeah, someday, I guess, we will.
But this wouldn't mean that we are very good at it. I mean, this is something that we have a lot of respect for the people who are designers. But anyway, it's very tempting, and sometimes it's tempting because of lack of resources. Sometimes it's tempting because you already have the know-how and the people who can do it. So it's not like something that we would think of ourselves as designers of that. It's just like an appendix of the other, like of the rest of the design of the space that we do. Okay. Thank you.